What's up, NIO family? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And this one I want to break down what's happening with NIO, Tesla, SPY, and the overall market. I'm also going to break down some big news coming out for tomorrow. How all of this could affect the share price of NIO, what you should be watching for as time goes on. But just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15 in total. Not to mention an 8.1% APY on uninvested cash. The offer ends very soon in just about 3 weeks. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the market. Looking at NIO, this is continuing to be range bound. If you guys look at this, we have a tendency of getting bought back up between $4.9 and $5. We have a tendency of getting rejected around the 5.3 area. So it hits the low fives, it bounces, hits 5.3, rejects, bounces, rejects, bounces, rejects, bounces, rejects. That's what it's been doing for the last couple of days. But as of recently, NIO was supposed to bounce off the $5 area on Friday. We ended up making a lower high here, then came back down, and now we're trying to hold this. So it's just, in my opinion, showing some weakness because the overall market held up. We actually saw a slight interesting flat day, but NIO of all things is a little bit weaker. That's why I wanted to just call that out. So as far as NIO goes, if we lose the $5 area, we're looking for 4.9 as our last support. If that breaks, there's going to be a much bigger dump to fill our gap below in the mid fours. If we manage to break past 5.13, we're looking for 5.26 to 5.3 is our target. Breakdown, we go up to 5.5. As of right now, we're range bound, but I do think there's going to be an attempt to push tomorrow morning back up to the 5.13 area, maybe a little bit above that. And then we'll see what happens after that. So I just see this being range bound for now. It's not really doing a whole lot. And we're just going to wait and see, can we break 5.3 to turn more bullish? Should we lose 5 and then 4.9 to turn more bearish? There's not much for me to say until we see which way it goes. So as of right now, look for a little rebound tomorrow morning, closer to 5.2. Then we'll see if it gets a rejection. And we're just range bound. It's very, very boring for the time being. Now I'll talk more about the broader markets and NIO news and such in just a couple of minutes. Just know this, today was Veterans Day in the USA, so I just want to honor all veterans out there. The banks have been closed for today. That's why there was low volume, and we saw the majority of stocks out there just kind of shop around. We saw Nvda and Aapl in the red. We saw Microsoft and Google kind of flat. Tech was pretty much just like flat overall, but finance did a little bit better, and so did consumer durables, led by Tesla. And overall, the market's like a salad. It's very, very mixed, some red, some green, all over the place. For other things worth mentioning, there was no data today. But for tomorrow, we have a couple of Fed speakers like Waller giving speeches. Then we have some bill auctions coming out. Then we have Kashkari giving a speech at 2 p.m. So make sure you're ready for that just to be safe. Then, for the Fear and Greed Index, this is currently at greed. There's still greed that's present in the markets as buyers are continuing to step in. We're at extremes on our market momentum indicator scale. And then the put to call option ratio is at extreme greed as we're seeing more buyers continuing to step in. This is once again showing us that lots of puts are being closed. And typically when we hit these levels, we do tend to see the market pull back a bit. So we'll see if that ends up being the case. The VIX is also kind of flat right here. It does tend to bounce off 14 to 15. It is attempting to hold up, but just be mindful of the fact that the market still adds some interesting resistance and hasn't officially gone a big rejection yet. It's still kind of flat. For earnings, we just have a couple of them like Zeta and Crab. Everything's very, very minor for today. Tomorrow is when we have Shopify and the Home Depot. I'll talk more about those tomorrow. But for now, just know that earnings are very minor. As far as NIO goes, we're looking at their new color schemes, which are very, very cool. That's something that's very cool about them. I mean, they have a very, very nice range of colors, which people tend to love. I think that's very, very good for their sales and the creativity involved. On top of this, we are seeing some analysts talking about their price targets for NIO. As of right now, NIO is pretty far away from its all-time high, but there is potential for this to eventually push a lot higher as years progress, according to different reports. So what are we seeing for their growth stages? You guys can see how there's been a lot of growth, at least in terms of their operating income, not to mention their overall revenues. That's what's bringing in a lot more growth. And as time goes on, there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be driving their performance, from new model launches, add-on services with more deliveries, not to mention improved margins as time goes on. So as time goes on, we are estimating that there's going to be an improvement in their overall price to share ratio. So that's going to be a lot more useful. I could be looking for potential targets all the way up into the 20s over the next couple of years, which can make investors seriously good returns. We could even squeeze higher as time goes on, forming a nice cup and handle. This is what many analysts are projecting us to eventually hit the 20s, if not 30s. So I think NIO will make a full recovery. It's going to take some time to get that run, but we are going to get closer there as years progress. Right now, volume's only at 49 million. That is below average. And then in terms of its financials, just know this: the revenue per share is still, it's been increasing, but their PE ratio is what is showing a little bit of weakness now because of the weakness we're seeing perpetuate on the share price. So what I see for tomorrow is the fact that we're going to try to push a little bit to about the 5.2 area. Look for a push tomorrow morning. If we don't break past 5.3, though, we're going to be coming back down. So a lot of sideways price action is most likely going to prevail. Just keep that in mind, guys. That's what I'm essentially anticipating as the most likely move. So just be very, very mindful of that. For other factors out there, we have SPY. SPY is starting to slow down just a bit. But just know this: we're still holding up quite well. Might be a big test tomorrow. I think that we're on a slight downtrend here. We might attempt to rebound tomorrow morning before we continue a little lower. But then I do think SPY is going to hold its support soon before it tries to bounce. So look for a rebound in the morning, then a continuation lower before we try to bounce again as the most likely case. We'll see if that ends up being the case, but that's what I'm anticipating, at least for the time being for this. There's a slight downtrend that's forming here, but we're holding support quite well. When you look at, for instance, the 4-hour time frame, this looks a little bit weaker as well. We might try to push tomorrow morning before we start to dip lower. It might be a little bit of a dip coming before this thing tries to bounce again. So overall, that's the most likely case. Even ES could be retesting 6,020 to 6,000 flat before it tries to bounce. So give it some time. Bitcoin remains very bullish, going for the 90,000 plus area. So I do anticipate more upside nonetheless. Tesla looks more bullish. I think tomorrow we kind of continue this pump up for 360 plus. It's continuing to squeeze, so it looks bullish to me. NQ is trying to bounce here. We're going to be watching to see if we can try to push up for 21,300 or even above that. So it's still trying to rebound. Might look for a little bit of a push. Might come down later on. So it might push a bit, come back down before it tries to bounce again. So give it some more time to develop. The QQQ is the same thing. It might dip a little bit closer to about the 512s before it tries to bounce again. There could be a slight dip closer to 510 to 512 before it tries to bounce. Just keep that in mind. As far as Aapl goes, we're making a lower high. We're kind of rejecting. We could try to push for 225 before it starts dipping again to about 222, but then it might attempt to bounce again, once again in this range, because it loves to bounce at 220. So I anticipate that it might pop and maybe dip a little bit closer to 220 again before it tries to bounce, but there could be a bounce coming to Aapl as long as we don't lose 220. The IWM is kind of churning here. It has attempted to push higher before slowing down. We'll see if 240 holds or not. If it holds 240, it could try to push for 244. If we lose 240, we're looking for it to dip back down to fill this gap to 238. So we'll see if that ends up being the case or not. Coin remains more bullish. We're looking for essentially 330 is our resistance. And above that, we have 335. We still remain more bullish. For Amazon, we have kind of like a double top here. We're going to be dipping back down to 205. We'll see if we bounce or not. Might dip a little bit lower. So 205 to 202 could be tested before it tries to rebound. So give it some time. Meta is dipping here. We're going to be looking for basically 580 to 578, and we'll see if we bounce off that. But look for a little bit more downside. For Microsoft, we could be dipping lower, closer to about 415 before it tries to bounce. So just keep that in mind. And Google looks a little bit more bullish. I think we're going to be forming a nice cup and handle like structure. This might actually push up for 182.62. With that being said, the market is very mixed. Some tickers are up, some are down. SPY is looking a little bit weaker here, so it might dip a little bit more, but there could be a bounce coming nonetheless. As far as NIO goes, unfortunately, it's just range bound, going back and forth between 5 and 5.3. So I presume this is going to likely continue as time goes on. Look for a push tomorrow morning. We'll see what kind of reaction we get. With that being said, I thank you all so much for listening. So please have a great day, and I'll see you guys very soon in the next one for tomorrow. Thank you for listening. Have a very happy Veterans Day in the US for those who are listening there, and peace out.